Hey, welcome back to my channel. I've been away for a couple of weeks and I'm going to try to get to regular programming from here on. Let's sketch this laksa. Again, this is a weekend sketcher activity. I'm out here at Holland Village Food and Market. And I bought myself a bowl of laksa and took some photograph. I didn't sketch it live, I ate it. I always say artists should not go hungry. Anyway, so I took a photograph and I sketched it from my photograph while waiting for some of the other sketches to arrive. Okay, the tip that I will give you as you draw is, I always say look at the object of your drawing, but sometimes when you're trying to do an oval or a circle, it is necessary to look at your sketchbook instead. And while you're drawing it, you just got to be comfortable that you're actually making the mark that you want. For the noodles, for the prawns, and whatever you see on the photograph, always give yourself some liberty. You don't really have to be inch perfect. You should be able to get your audience to be able to read it. So if it's a prawn, make sure that they see it as a prawn, not as a crab. If it's some strands of noodles here and there, maybe you want to bunch some up together to make it more readable. The ability to read is very important because what that means is that your audience understand what they're seeing, and not just because you're trying to be completely accurate. Even if you're copying the photograph, you should impart some of symbols, readability into your drawing and sketch. So in today's video, I have left the actual speed of drawing. In other words, this is the it's not speed up, it is the actual rate that I have sketched on my sketchbook. You'll see it in real speed. So as you can see, I'm not meddling around too much. I am just putting down marks, hopefully clearly, that prawns are prawns, noodles are noodles, tofu, bits and bobs of chilies, and some sprinkle of onions, green onions are visible and they are readable to the audience. While I wait for decisions on putting in the colors, I decided that I will write the date. It's the 28th of July 2024, and my name, just to make sure that I have those in, and when I color it, I don't really mess up the page as well. Okay, so I decided to start putting in the shadow first. For this sketch, I mixed myself deep purple, French ultramarine, and permanent alizarin crimson. Those two colors are my power purple, the darkest I could get. And I'm going to put down the shadows underneath the bowl, as you can see it in the photograph. There's two patches, one with a bit darker and so on. But I am going to leave it for now just to give it a good shape. I also noticed that the shadow is a bit harsh with very sharp edges, so I decided to do the same. Normally for shadows, I would soften the edges and make sure that I have a soft edge, but in this case, I decided to leave it hard. Now, the other decisions I made here is to also go a bit dark as well on the shapes of the noodles, the prawns, and to make it pop in 3 dimension by using shadow as a way of propping it up. So you can see that I'm laying down very strong shadows using the same mixture of permanent alizarin crimson and French ultramarine, and making sure that you could separate the shape, and the shadow is sort of a separator if you like, but it's also a sort of a prop to make your 2-dimensional shape look more 3D if you like. The slight improvement I could have made out of these would be to soften some of the edges of the shadow. but I decided to kind of go hard on the shadow, and hopefully the second layer I put on top will soften the shadow somewhat. So that was the thinking process that I was going through when I was laying down the various shadows for the noodles, for the tofu, for the prawns, and so on. I mean, sometimes you just have to take a bit of risk by simplifying, or basically reducing your process. You could be 100% correct and be pedantic about your process, but then it takes longer, it takes more effort, and maybe the improvement could be very minuscule or very minimal. So in that sense, you don't really you can get away with some simplification of your processes. The next thing I do is to look at the yellow, the noodles. I'm going in with lemon yellow, and then I'm going to try to warm it up with a bit of new gambosh and some quinacridone gold. Those are colors, brown, sort of orangey, or warmer yellow if you like, and then that gives it a bit of a more robust shape, because I always like 2 or 3 colors in one shape. It gives it a bit more, I guess, more mature look to the shape, if you like. Because if you leave it in a single color, in a single shape, it's sort of it's very illustrative in nature, and it doesn't look like what I see. So I think you could see that in the color, the photo itself, the colors are usually coming in multiple hues. At this point, maybe I'll comment on the color scheme. As you can see, the color scheme is yellow, purple, my favorite. There are three opposites you could use. The traditional Christmas green, red is it's used quite often. Blue, orange is the most popular of the lot. Usually some kind of a cobalt and a burnt sienna. Those are the almost most of the traditional watercolorists in this part of the world uses that combination, blue or orange, but yellow purple is a modern opposites, if you like, and I love it because it's just not many people like this scheme, but I think it's quite cute to be in the minority, almost like playing the David and Goliath sort of, where everybody is the Goliath or the majority, and we play the minority and sort of underdog, if you like. And just a little while ago, you see that I did a bit of a sprinkling. In the photograph, you will see the slice of tofu has a bit of sprinkle on it. It's very hard to paint those little dots. You could try to randomly dots, or apply the dots, but it's so much easier if you just give your loaded brush a few taps and let the drips fall on the paper, and it's more realistic. It's more I guess more accurate representations of what I see, even though it's not exactly dot for dot, but it's a splatter and a sprinkling that gives you a sense of what you see. Well, at this point, I'm just thinking in shape. Every single white piece of shape, I'm thinking what shape it is, how should I apply the color, what value, how much of intensity, how much pigment I need to load. Is it a transparent sort of a color that I should be applying, or is it a thick paste of color, and so on and so forth. But the key is that I'm always thinking in shapes. I'm trying not to draw with my brush. Make sure that it is watercolor, so the brush is loaded with lots of water, clearly, right? So very often I see beginners, they forget that they're doing watercolor. They load the brush with very little paint, and then they start drawing with it as if it's a pencil or pencil color, color pencil, and it looks very, very different. It doesn't look like a watercolor, but it looks more like a sort of a badly drawn poster color instead. So try not to do that. Try to load your brush with enough water, making sure that it is watercolor that you're doing, and so it gives you that sort of watery look. Let the water does its magic. So like I said, the yellow, the orange, the brown, the red, the reddish orange if you like. There's a bunch of colors that I've thrown in there as well. When I want it to be a bit darker, actually you could see that the shadow itself, the shadow that I laid earlier, has softened somewhat when you lay the second layer of watercolor on top. Although some of the edges are still quite sharp, but it's not so obvious as compared to, say, the shadow at the bottom underneath the bowl. So, you know, all in all, sometimes you can take a bit of risk, reduce your process, and simplify, and it sort of make your sketch and your drawing a little bit more fun to do without having to worry about too much detail. And sometimes you could execute your plan where there's just too much little things that you're doing, and it brings very little advantage in that sense to your sketch. I mix a turquoise greenish sort of color to represent the bowl. It's not very accurate color, as you can see from a photograph. It's a bit lighter and a bit greenier, but the color that I have on my palette is a cobalt teal, which is a turquoise sort of color. I added a bit of green, and then that's what I get, the mixture. But it's okay. I mean, it's still close enough to be a turquoise of sort of a color. And I'm gonna first lay one layer very unevenly. There are some parts where the pigments are a little bit more concentrated, and some part where I've used a little bit more water in my brush to draw it. It's unequal because, as you can see from the bowl itself, it is not an evenly colored bowl. The shadowed part a bit darker, and there are some parts where there are lights, although they are artificial fluorescent light, it does cast a bit of a light on it, and you could see that it's actually almost white in some spots. So you know, you kind of have to go with the flow in trying to mimic the bowl, the color, the turquoise, without having to use one single color mix on your palette, and then you try to lay it out as evenly as possible, right? That's not the way I see it, so you know, I do it as I observe. And then what I did was to texture. I drop in some water, clean water on it, and it has some bubbles. I give a very interesting texture, making the sketch a little bit more alive. Although that's not reality, that's not what I see, but I decided to make it more interesting by texturing it. And now I'm texturing the sambal or chili paste on the top right, and then I'm dropping in permanent alizarin crimson, some orange. Later on, I'll just put a layer over it, but the texture should hold, hopefully. The photograph in the description, as usual. The last time I had some problems, with it because Pexels for some reason delayed the publication of the link until much later. So I'm going to put a few links. One of the link would be my Pexels homepage. So if you go to that, you should be able to find the photograph. The other one is that I will probably post the photo in YouTube itself, community page. So in that case, you can also get from those two sources. I like Pexels because I use it a lot and I really like to support them. But because of the problem I've had in the last round, I probably just have a backup via the YouTube community page. Okay, back to the drawing. I'm using very light blue, a bit of cobalt, a bit of French ultramarine thrown in, but I neutralize it with a bit of new gamboge, and then I use that to create a bit of shadowy part of the prawn, if you like, but also to give it a bit of a base before I load some of the orange on top of the shape itself. Like I said, sometimes it's very important to control the amount of water in your brush. Sometimes you do have to use very transparent color, like in this case I'm using very transparent orange, transparent blue as well, because in order for the transparency of the paper to shine through, you don't really want to cover up everything. Leaving white is important. Of course, you can get white back by putting some opaque white on top, but remember, opaque white and paper white are two different things. Your eyes can see the difference and you cannot lie to it, and so it's important to keep the paper white where you need to, especially if you want to showcase very transparent sort of areas of the sketch. But if you really want some highlight, whether it's blown out sort of white, opaque white can do that job. But sometimes that opaque white cannot do the job of telling your audience that it's transparent, it's translucent. It's much better to leave paper white for those patches, if you like. We're not being 100% accurate, but we are trying to create shapes and create a hint or indications of little things that we see on the bowl. Trying to sort of represent it the best we can, but sometimes it's not really necessary to be 100%, right? If you like, but you can take some liberty at simplifying, at making sure that the symbols are readable, and I think that's pretty much all you need to do. In order for the noodles to pop up and be seen, I try to separate those shapes by putting a bit more darker spot around it, and just to give it a bit of a push, if you like. And also the curry, the laksa, if you like, has dots all over it because of the floating oil. And later on I'll have to kind of use some reds to create little dots all over to mimic that look and feel as well. And of course, lastly, I'll have to highlight it with white. But at this point, I'm just looking at it and observing, and trying to see whether my audience will be able to recognize the prawn, recognize the noodles, recognize the tofu bit, the sambal or the chili paste, and trying to carve or create a three-dimensional body out of essentially a two-dimensional piece of paper, right? And remember, every shape, sometimes you have to separate them, sometimes you have to create body by loading more pigment. Don't load pigments evenly across, but learn to load unevenly according to what you see and what gives the 3D feel to the sketch. I think a lot, just talk a little bit about that. And I have another trip coming up. Coming Wednesday, I'm flying to Penang. This will be the sketch walk in Penang, organized by the wonderful people of Sketches from Penang. People like Kia Kian and all the other organizer. And I'm really looking forward to it. There's some friends I've not met for years, and I think this will be a good time to catch up with some of them. I did not go to the last two Asia Link because of work, and so I'm really looking forward to this. Alright, so what am I doing sketch? I'm trying to darken some of the spots where I see that there are a bit more shadow, and the mixture is the same, my cobalt teal, but I load a bit more of green, and I touch in a bit of permanent alizarin crimson in it to sort of give it a bit of a neutral color. And that's what I see. And on the bowl itself, there are some places where I see there are darker spots, and so try to mimic that with my shading, if you like, with watercolor. So back to the story of meeting some friends in Penang. I think it's going to be one where there's going to be a lot of food as well. The Singapore contingent is quite a big one. We have, I guess, more than maybe 30 people. It's sort of a guess. We have to see how many people actually end up going. But from what I see, there's probably 20 something, 30 of us coming from Singapore to Penang. And I think it's going to be about 400 or 500 people in Penang. It's going to be a blast having all these sketches and people I see constantly on my Instagram, my Facebook, but not really meeting them regularly, but seeing them once a year in the past. But now some of them I've not seen. Some of them I've not seen from before COVID, so it'll be fun to see them actually and meet up and catch up and just to see what's going on in their life. It is a wonderful community, the Sketches group in Asia and Southeast Asia, and I really enjoy sketching with them, and also just to banter and learn from them and to improve my skills as well. Okay, back to the sketch. I am thinking I need a bit of a fine line to draw and draw a little bit very thin line to give it a bit of separation of some of the shapes, or even just to give some texturing, if you like, with the lines. And I think, the quote that comes to mind is Edgar Whitney's quote. He says, "The most beautiful watercolor calligraphy on virgin washes." And it took me a long time to understand this quote, because calligraphy essentially is using very thin line. It's drawing with liner, or with, in this case, I use fountain pen, empty fountain pen, and I like to do that because it gives me very thin lines. And then virgin washes are basically washes that you with lots of water, wash it down with all the colors, and you leave it. You don't touch it, and so it gives it a sort of a very authentic and very fresh look that you cannot get with multiple touches on the paper. So I encourage beginners to learn how to lay washes in minimal touches to the paper, in one touch, two touch, leave it, right, and leave the wash so that it is very pristine, and it's very uniquely sort of laid down without having been over sort of destroyed by your over enthusiastic touches, basically. So calligraphy on virgin washes, right? So, and that means thinking a lot before you actually commit to the actions on the paper itself. All right, so I continue to layer many sort of shadows and so on, to it's sort of texturings and also putting lines, if you like, because it's something like creating the flow of the space, or flow of the object itself, right? So although I darken it very, very lightly, very, very somewhat, it's not very obvious, but your eyes can see it, because even if you lay down a very thin, transparent wash on a existing color, it still work. It will still give you a sense of a shape, if you like. I had an accident with my green, and I cleaned it up. It's going to be a mess looking green, but when I looked at it and observed it, I realized that it's not so bad. So I'm going to leave it with that bloom, making it feel like there's a piece of vegetable out of the mistake. Oftentimes when there's a mistake, we immediately want to fix it, but sometimes you just give it a bit of a moment, let it dry, observe it, and then decide whether it's something that adds or destroy your sketch. Watercolor edit is possible, but you don't necessarily have to edit all mistakes. Sometimes the mistake can be interesting. In this case, I'm just going to leave it. It looks like an accidental piece of vegetable sticking out, but that's all right. I can live with that, so I leave it. I think I'm almost done. Sometimes it's very difficult to know when to stop, but when you look at your sketch and you feel that there's a little bit more you want to add to it, but in my mind, I'm thinking, is it three-dimensional enough? The prawns, do they look like prawns? Do I need to separate the shape more? Do I texture a little bit? Do I have space or shape that doesn't look like a part of the laksa? And yeah, so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I need more texture, so I'm going to put in a little bit more here and there. And especially after I've laid down the white lines, I think I should be able to separate those shapes a little bit more. But splatter is very useful, so I load up my brush. I used two brushes. In this case, I only use one. And it's a number 6 travel brush, Da Vinci, Kolinsky. I like Kolinsky brush because it's soft, but it has a bit of can load a bit of water in it. Okay, so at this point, I am thinking, okay, the highlights needs to go in. I need to put in a bit more white, and I use the opaque white, and before it's too sharp, I smudge it with my finger, but it leaves a bit of a white spot, if you like. And I continue to do that to see where I need to put in more highlights. Basically just observing the photograph and replicating what I see. That's really the basic steps of doing the highlight. There's some are lines, some are dots, and I try to mimic that as best I can with my pen. It's easy to do it when it's dry, so you do need a bit of patience. My suggestion is to leave it to dry, do some social media, use your camera, take some photograph, take some video, come back after 10 minutes, and then, you know, continue to put in the whites. Very often we're too eager. While it's wet, we try to put in our highlight, it just smudges all over and it's destroy our sketch. With watercolor, I realized that it has taught me patience. It has given me a lot of patience. It has given me a lot of knowledge, not just about the art world, but also about life. Be patient, right? Learn to wait, and sometimes the timing is not correct, so you just have to wait. Yeah, so you know, I think I'm almost done. I am doing my last bit of touches. Again, reading where the highlights are, smudging it with my finger. It's a very relaxing activity, I find. I mean, I was just sitting there with my sketchbook, with my camera, and surrounding me were lots of people having their breakfast, and they didn't disturb me. I was enjoying it myself. I was sharing a table with somebody. He kept looking at what I was doing, but I was smiling at him, and and it's nice to share a table and not be disturbed too much. And I could see some of the sketches arriving already outside the food court, and I'll join them, probably do another sketch. But at this point, I think I'm almost done. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I've left the sketch at real time. I didn't speed it up, so you could see how fast or slow I normally sketched. My previous videos, they're all speed up. But I hope you stay safe wherever you are. This is We Take out for this week. Hopefully I'll be doing one video a week again from now on. Bye.